Hello class, we are going to be talking about the principles of outlining and I'm hoping that this would be a refresher, pair our speech outlines here. So here is a sample outline that I pulled from our resources tab in our textbook. The outline, or the two files I'm going to be looking at, will be the speech to inform on coffee as well as the informative speech preparation outline. So what I'll be looking at here is the informative speech preparation outline checklist. Now, if you're ever wondering what do I think about or what am I looking for, anytime I'm looking at an outline, go to the outline checklist and bullet by bullet by bullet, these are the things that I'm looking for. Let's take a look at this outline. So first off, you'll notice that we have our specific purpose and our central idea here at the top of the page. Since we are doing an informative speech, we have to inform my audience of the short-term and long-term effects of coffee on the human body. When we take a look at the central idea, coffee contains the stimulant caffeine, which has certain effects on the body, such as alertness, dehydration, upset digestive system, insomnia, and better pattern separation memory. When I take a look at this central idea, I'm sure hoping that I see those points in the main point. So these main points, represented by Roman numerals on the far left margin here, is again, I want you guys to look at your points here as like a track, like on a running track. You got your main points down here, sub points sit here, sub points sit here. If we had a sub point, then that would be indented probably in this area here. So we'll take a look at how all of this stuff is getting laid out here. So first thing you'll notice is that we have all of our headings labeled and centered. So introduction, body, and conclusion. And then again, each of those represent parts of a speech. So in communication studies, we outline in a way where we have complete sentence outlines. We hit the reset button with our Roman numeral counting for each part. So for example, your first point in your introduction, body, and conclusion will be represented by a Roman numeral. So you'll see that the body here, Roman numeral 1, and Roman numeral 1. Here in the introduction, you'll notice that each point only has one sentence. You'll notice that we have transition statements. So in COM, we have a formal transition statement, and there's only two of them, and they go in between the introduction and the body and into the conclusion. And you'll notice the way we write the transition is parentheses, transition with a capital T, a colon, then it's one sentence, and then close parentheses. And you'll notice that it falls right on the same track as our main points. Now let's take a look at the introduction of the speech. Look at those perky faces out there. You look like you've had coffee this morning. According to my in-class survey, 20 out of 28 of you drink at least 1 cup of coffee per day. I will introduce you both the short-term and long-term effects coffee has on your body. So you could see that this person used their audience survey finding in the introduction, which is critical. And here we start to see that, boy, this person's going to have main points and they're going to be divided by short-term and long-term effects. And then the transition is as simple as, let's start with the short-term effects of coffee on your body. Then we have the body centered here, the label centered here. Many of us drink coffee to satisfy our own short-term needs and being more alert, performing our daily activities. And then look at how this person only has one sentence per point, beautiful, nice indentation. Look how nicely they're aligned too. So all your sub points are nicely aligned and your subpoints are nicely aligned. There's no jaggedness of any of these lines here. But let's take a look at how they orally weaved the academic journal. According to the Journal of International Society of Sports Nutrition, it says caffeine is effective for enhancing sport performance in trained athletes when consumed in low to moderate dosages. The author goes on to explain that while the findings from this study conclude that caffeine is effective in sports performance, and they also concede that the performance is correlated with the condition of the athlete, the type of exercise, and the dosage of caffeine. So now the author goes on to say, well, the article also referenced a study conducted by a group of sleep-deprived Navy SEALs on their performance. And after consuming random dosages of caffeine on tasks involving alertness, vigilance, memory, and reaction times, it was concluded that the caffeine did in fact promote significant results in their tasks. So then the author goes on to continue. So here we have a second main point, and despite some of the positive short-term effects, there are also downsides. So here this person talks about the benefits and then for the downsides of short-term use of caffeine. Again, one sentence per point. Now let's take a look at how this person wove in the book source. Author Richard Gilbert, in his book, Caffeine, the Most Popular Stimulant, can not only cause dehydration, but can also lead to digestive system becoming upset and reduce the body's ability to absorb certain nutrients. So then the speaker goes on to further explain that quote, and here we go. This is what a sub point would look like, a 1 and an A. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, you have a main point. For each main point, we're going to have distinct ideas. And so each of those distinct ideas is represented by a capital letter. And the question we always want to ask ourselves is, do these capital letters support the main point that we're talking about? And taking it a larger scope, do each of these main points support our specific purpose? Are each of our main points represented here in the central idea? So let's go back to Roman numeral 2 here. Nice quote from the book. And now we have a third main point, and now we have the magazine source. Now here, we're using the BBC News magazine. Look at how they use the Dean of George Washington University School of Public Health. That enhances credibility. So when we're thinking about how do we enhance our credibility as public speakers, pulling expert testimony allows us to take information from these experts, weave them into our speech, which adds to our credibility as public speakers. Fourth main point, aha. Here we have the newspaper. So in the newspaper, the Los Angeles Times. And what's really nice about this quote is that they're pulling a story from researchers from Johns Hopkins University, which is a very highly credible source, especially dealing with public health. We have a transition that goes into the conclusion. So here, this person decided to use a quote from Edna Ferber, and now we have, in conclusion, signals the end of the speech and also restates the main points of the speech. The conclusion has got to be relatively brief. Now, one thing I do like is that over here, the speaker decided to use a quote, summarize, and leave the speech with a very memorable quote. So, good communication is as stimulating as coffee and just as hard. I found this to be pretty clever since we're taking a communication studies course. Now, when we take a look at the conclusion, we'll notice that, one, it signals to the audience, hey, we're concluding the speech. And the purpose of the conclusion is to, one, signal the end of the speech, two, restate the central idea, and leave the speech with either a quote or a rhetorical question or something that makes this speech memorable. And this person did that right on the money because this looks very similar to the central idea that we had at the top of the page. We also have to remember that the central idea is probably one of the most versatile sentences when crafted very nicely that you can use in your speech. You can actually use your central idea as we take a look at this here in the conclusion, and it also works very nicely towards the end of the introduction. Keep that in mind, but let's take a look at this conclusion. And here we're signaling the end of the speech. Here we're restating our central idea, and here we end off with a nice quote. So here we end off with a nice quote. Now here you'll see that we have our bibliography. So notice that this is labeled and centered, and then this person has all of their sources. We'll notice that they're in alphabetical order per the author. So we're going from Class, Gilbert, Goldstein, Kelly, Netburn, Reynolds, and I'm able to go look at these sources and find them myself. And that's really the key for a bibliography. Now, the bibliography is used for all of the sources that you used for your speech. Now, when you're trying to figure out how I can take a look at capturing all of these ideas in my outline, take a look at your preparation outline checklist. Is the specific purpose and the central idea at the top of the page? Does the central idea specifically reflect the main points of the speech? Did I label introduction, body, conclusion, and bibliography? Do the first sentence in each of our parts, the introduction, body, conclusion, start off with a Roman numeral 1? Do each of your points only have one sentence? Remember, only one sentence per point. Are each of your points in complete sentence? There must be no bullets or any of these italicized letters in our outlines. That is not part of our language. So when you have these kind of things, those got to be reassigned to the appropriate number or letter. Here, do you have between 2 and 5 main points? A common error that we make is that we have more than 5 main points, and more than 5 main points, your audience is going to have a very difficult time following along. Do you have a transition statement between the introduction and the body and the conclusion? Notice here I have parentheses, transition, colon, close parentheses. Did you outline your introduction and conclusion? Sometimes we forget to do that. Did I appropriately weave my oral citations throughout my speech? Notice in the speech that we just looked at, they did a great job identifying the required sources. If you still need some more assistance in working with your oral citations, take a look at my other video. Did you check for proper punctuation, spelling, and grammar? And here, remember, we work on tracks. So your main points will be lined here. And that'll also include transitions. They'll also be on this track. Subpoints, 1 tab in. Subpoints will be 1 tab in from the subpoint. And then a subpoint will be 1 tab in from this. So what we did is we've taken a look at an outline. We've looked at our checklist, and I'm hoping that this is a nice aid for you when preparing your speech.